समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This episode takes us into the secret world of espionage, states fighting states, big state rivalry. However, I'm beginning it with a double gambit. So here is the first of these two that I'm going to play with you, the double gambit. This is a tweet. This is a tweet from the CIA. From the CIA put out on their official Twitter handle, or X handle actually, on 3rd of May this year, 3rd of May. And this says, I'm just reading the tweet for you, ICYMI, which means in case you missed it. In case you missed it, yesterday CIA released 2 Mandarin language videos aimed at recruiting Chinese officials to help the US. As I'm speaking with you, part of that video is playing on your screen. And you can see it. This is a Mandarin video. You and I will not understand it. It's very slickly done. If I see comments under it, a lot of people say this is cringe, etc., etc. But this is the biggest super powerful intelligence agency, external intelligence agency, actually putting out promotional videos to try and recruit Chinese officials to betray their nation and to start working for the CIA. Slickly done, right? That's one. Now, don't read this alone. That's the reason I said it's a double gambit. I will now read one more para to you. And then I will tell you who this para comes from. It says, and this is from a piece of writing which I will just share with you. It says, if intelligence analysts at the CIA saw our rivals engage in this kind of great power suicide, we will break out the bourbon. Instead, the sound we hear is of champagne glasses clinking in the Kremlin and Chungnanhai. Chungnanhai is a little bit like the Kremlin in Beijing. It's next to the Forbidden City and Forbidden Garden. This is the huge, humongous compound where the top Chinese Communist Party officials, the leaders live and also work. So it says instead of us opening bourbon, the sound we hear is of champagne glasses clinking in the Kremlin and Chungnanhai. Now this is written by William Burns. William Burns is a career Foreign Service officer in the US. He rose up to Deputy Secretary, which is rare for a career civil servant in the State Department. Then he became ambassador to multiple countries, starting with Jordan, ending up with Moscow, as important as that, and then was appointed CIA director by Joe Biden in 2021. And that is the term he finished as Trump came into power. William Burns has written this letter. This letter got published in The Atlantic on August 20. Please see this. You will see screenshots as I speak. And it begins, dear colleagues. So he's speaking out to his colleagues in the State Department, also in the intelligence community. And this is about the gutting of the State Department and the intelligence community, also National Security Council, because Trump and his people, that is Tulsi Gabbard, Kash, Patel, under the watch of Marco Rubio, all of them have been gutting these organizations, literally driving out tens of thousands of people, apparently to save money on jobs, but basically getting rid of a lot of specialists. Also particularly targeting those who might have crossed Donald Trump in multiple ways. I will come to that. There is a night of long knives that is on right now in Washington in the larger American security and intelligence proliferations. This is the grandmother of all purges. We've seen purges and purges. This not just rivals the purges of the communist era in Moscow and Beijing. This goes a step further because those purges would be maybe Lin Biao in 1971 is on a plane, apparently trying to escape from China. He was Mao's nominated or at least supposedly chosen successor, former defense minister also. The plane crashes, he disappears. We now see people dropping off out of the windows in Russia as well. But this kind of mass level purge, this is a massacre. So this is much more than the night of long knives in the American establishment. This is a massacre on a scale that no civil services, no intelligence services, in fact, no militaries have ever imagined. So let me give you some examples. Let me give you some examples of what's going on and the reason we started with this double gambit with you, because on the one hand, you think that you need to, and you think that you have the power and you have the smarts and you have the money. You have the allurement to lure people out of another country, to make them turn traitor against their own big country, which is going to be a superpower, on its way to be a superpower. And the arrogance that advertisement has to say that, look, I can offer you a better job than what your country has given you. Come, become a traitor. Like, at the same time, the same country is burning up the same organization and the same services. That is the story for today. Now see a few things which have happened lately, and I'm just listing them for you. Number one, there have been raids on John Bolton. John Bolton is a former national security advisor, no less. He's a lifelong Republican Party animal. I don't say animal with disrespect. He's been in the Republican Party forever, has worked with multiple presidents and multiple administrations, and rose to the level of national security advisor under Trump until he fired him in 2019. He fired him in 2019 and then Bolton became his critic. Bolton actually was a Republican Party hawk. He wanted to wage wars everywhere. Compared to him, now I know it's ironical, compared to him, Donald Trump would be a dove, genuinely be a peacemaker compared to John Bolton. John Bolton just wanted to launch war everywhere. That was his way of expressing or asserting American power. However, the two fell out. After 2019, he became a big critic of Trump. He wrote a book about him, which is also the reason why he probably got raided. I will tell you a bit more about the book as we go along. So the raids on him, you had not imagined in the world's most powerful democracy, a recent former national security advisor being raided by the FBI. And you saw those pictures of FBI agents taking boxes of documents and folders from his home in suburban Maryland. They also raided his office in Washington, D.C. FBI Chief Kash Patel immediately tweeted about this. In fact, he celebrated this raid and he said, "No one is above the law." See that tweet? No one is above the law. FBI agents on mission. Trump, he was asked on the sidelines of something, what he thought of the raids, or did he know about the raids? And he said, he had seen this on TV. And then he said, oh, but Bolton, he's a lowlife, not a smart guy. Now, to be fair, Bolton has been saying words about Trump lately. Even on Trump ruining his relationship with India, Bolton has been the loudest and the sharpest critic. So Trump is paying him back, but this is not something that you expected in America, probably not even in the McCarthyist era, because McCarthyism, if anything, was seen as a bad thing, and there was sufficient opposition from the other side that said it's a cheap thing. However, not right now. Trump's got too much power. Number two, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, he fired a 3-star general, no less, a 3-star general, and the chief of DIA. DIA is Defense Intelligence Agency. So he summarily fired Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz, 3-star general. Why? Reason was not stated, but everybody knows that the reason was that the DIA gave an assessment on American strikes in Iran that said that the damage to Iranian nuclear facilities was relatively limited. This contrasted with Trump's claim, which he repeated just a couple of days back also, that these facilities were completely obliterated. His own DIA said that the damage was relatively limited. For that quote-unquote crime, the chief of DIA was fired. Then Trump administration and Tulsi Gabbard, acting on part of Trump administration, revoked the security clearance of 37 key intelligence officials, most of them from CIA. One of these was Win Nguyen. Win Nguyen was the American intelligence organizations, in this case NSA, National Security Administration, top scientist in artificial intelligence, cryptology, and advanced mathematics. He was invaluable, and the acting director of the NSA tried very hard to save him. See the story from the New York Times, but could not, because these were people who were marked out for a purge. And why were they marked out for a purge? Because many of them were part of an earlier investigation into what is seen by Trump's opponents as Russian interference in the 2016 election. That is something that Trump has never accepted. Trump has always called it the Russia hoax, and Tulsi Gabbard describes it as a year-long coup against Trump. So all the officials in these intelligence agencies, including CIA and NSA, etc., who were seen to have anything to do with any of this, right? With that Russia inquiry, all of them have now been thrown out. We also saw that from James Comey, that cryptic from James Comey, which was interpreted by the Trump camp as instigation for assassination, and they were threats of filing cases against him. That did not happen. At least that has not happened as yet. As I said earlier, this happens in countries, but this happens usually in autocratic countries. So this used to happen in the Soviet Union. It happens a little bit in Russia also now. Prigozhin is a star one day, tomorrow his plane can disappear. Those things can happen in Russia. Those things happen in China, and I will give you some details as we go along. But in China, these are kept under the wraps. You find out in the course of time, and you keep wondering what happened. Even today, we don't know exactly what happened to Lin Biao or why what happened to Lin Biao happened. So those things are still kept sort of under the wraps, not in Trump's America. In Trump's America, everything is now out in the open. Now the issue with John Bolton, that is the most recent thing. John Bolton was fired by Trump in 2019 September. Of course, there is an issue about that also. Bolton says he resigned. Trump says, no, I fired him. He had served as NSA for 17 months. He wrote a book titled The Room Where It Happened. So that's really the fly on the wall talking, the room where it happened. So this was a kiss and tell on Trump's way of governing, especially on issues of foreign policy and national security. Now, as happens in any system, in the Indian system also, that manuscript was submitted to the government for security clearance in case there were elements in it that were classified. Now, even the Biden administration took a long time clearing it. It set up a team, took a long time clearing it. Finally, after many changes, the book was cleared for publication. However, the moment Trump administration came in, the second Trump administration came in, they once again started an inquiry. In this case, they gave that review not to the intelligence agencies who had seen it earlier, but they gave it to an administrative officer in the White House. His name is Michael Ellis. He now gave a report which pretty much tossed out the earlier intelligence assessment on the manuscript and said there was a lot else that was objectionable and that was a security risk. That Michael Ellis was subsequently appointed Deputy Director of the CIA. That's a very serious position. The officer who led the original review team in the intelligence agencies, that officer disagreed with Michael Ellis and said that this is just a way of trampling on John Bolton's rights, particularly his First Amendment rights. That is his right to free speech that every American citizen has. Bolton, in any case, went ahead and published the book. Since then, there's been no case against him, but he's been raided. But as you know, with these things, you don't know when other documentation will arise. All of this, and the large-scale firings at State Department in thousands, State Department, NSA, National Security Council. Trump is an incredible president who's been functioning without a national security advisor, because he had appointed a national security advisor, Mike Waltz, but he's the one who made that group on Signal planning these attacks on the Houthis in Yemen, and they were discussing the details of the attacks, and he supposedly, absent-mindedly, put the editor of the Atlantic magazine on that group, right? That ultimately led to his departure. He was given a sinecure as the American ambassador to the United Nations. But since then, NSA, Trump has seen no need to hire an NSA. Marco Rubio also does that job, and NSC, National Security Council Secretariat, has also been pared down to a very tiny shadow of what it usually is. It's also sort of especially ironical that William Burns, former CIA chief, who's written this cry from the heart, the Dear Colleagues letter, that's also published in The Atlantic, whose editor Mike Walls had put on his Signal group. And I'm quoting a couple of more paras from William Burns's letter, because these are telling. So there is one, it says, this is what's going on. He says, this is not about reform, but retribution. This is to create fear, mistrust, and paralysis among professionals. And he says it is about deterring anyone from speaking truth to power. And then he says tensions between elected leaders and career public servants are common. They are hardly new. We've all dealt with them. But once the elected political leaders decide on something, we may disagree with it, but we carry out those orders. That is the job of career civil servants. He says what's going on right now is not that. It's not like those differences. There is a difference between fixing bureaucratic malaise. He says, I've worked with 6 presidents across the 2 parties, and many have expressed impatience or exasperation also with the slow pace of bureaucratic functioning. So he says, I understand that you need to reform bureaucratic functioning. That's important. And he says, and I quote from his letter, and you will see these passages on your screen, there's a difference between fixing bureaucratic malaise and hammering professional public servants into politicized robots. That is what's going on now. And then he goes on to say, these are strong words, that's what autocrats do. They cow public servants into submission, and in doing so, they create a closed system that is free of opposing views and inconvenient concerns. And then he gives an example. He says, when you put yourself in that kind of an echo chamber, when you get cocooned like that, then you may make big mistakes. And he gives the example of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, that if he had more people around him who could speak truth to power, maybe they would have told him it's not such a good idea, and that the reading that he was given of Ukraine's ability to defend itself, or the West's willingness to come to Ukraine's aid, that was misplaced. But there was nobody to tell him that, and that's why he just went ahead and did his thing. He says also that all of this should be seen with the destruction of other powerful American institutions, because he says every professional knows that hard power and soft power have to work together. And that's where he talks about, he rules the gutting of US aid, Voice of America, and the State Department. And he says, in history, we haven't seen a bigger, I'm quoting him now, a bigger strategic self-immolation. In fact, as you read more, you can see that this is really somebody coming out with a lot of pain. He says it's a destruction, a self-inflicted generational setback to American leadership and national security. Now, I told you, that's the reason I used the double gambit to begin with, that this stuff happens in China also. Now, CIA is targeting, American power is targeting the Chinese officials, basically saying, you don't have so much freedom, you have too many people watching over you, come work for us, we'll give you more, etc., etc. How do things happen in China? So I'll give you some examples. Although everybody's left wondering and debating, and stories come out 2 years later, 3 years later, sometimes not even 55 years later, as say for Lin Biao. So in the last 3 years, since 2023, 45 top officers or leaders of the PLA and the Chinese military-industrial complex, they've been fired or they've disappeared, right? Some of these we featured in some episodes of Cut the Clutter. This data of 45 is from Jamestown Foundation. 2 defense ministers were charged the same day with corruption and also betrayal of Xi Jinping. In 2024, Communist Party of China, Chinese Communist Party, CCP. It, quote unquote, disciplined 8,89,000 party people, 70 of these either provincial top officials or above that level. In 2022, we all saw those videos of Hu Jintao, the former president, being escorted out at the party convention. In 2023, Li Keqiang, the former premier, died at 68, sort of mysteriously because nothing was explained. However, we always thought that this kind of mystique was limited to communist societies, old USSR, right? Old USSR, maybe to some extent Putin's Russia, also greatly Xi Jinping's China. Now, if that is happening in America, and it's happening with two differences. One, it's happening on industrial scale. So it's not one or two people, it's like hundreds of people at the same time. Industrial scale. And second, it's taking place in full public view, because the fact is that is obviously Trump's intention. He wants people to see what his power is. And I saw one more video from him, or one more clip from him, where he was talking and he was saying our defense department has been so great, we won every war we fought. And then he goes on to say that every war that we have fought and won, the First World War, Second World War, then this was called the Department of War. Then we won wars. And then he rules the fact that America has not been winning many wars lately. So immediately thought came to my mind, does he now want to rename Department of Defense as Department of War? In which case, he will continue also to claim that he is the president of peace. How do you balance the two? Don't ask me, because Donald Trump is a phenomenon, a unique phenomenon, sui generis in his own right.